If you're going to build a house, what do you start with? Do you go to your empty lot, take all the supplies that you bought, and start building right there? No. You dig down first, and you dig down to build a foundation. If you're going to start building a house, you always start with the foundation. So why would it be any different for your life? If you want to build a life where you're not constantly worrying and stressing about money, then you got to build a solid financial foundation. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to show you all the components of a solid financial foundation so that you can use your life to do bigger and better things than worry and stress all the time. You weren't put on this earth to worry about money. You are meant to understand and master the game that money forces us to play so you can do what you are meant to do, whatever that may be. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to identify what steps you need to take in order to complete your financial foundation. You won't know what specific products to look for because I'm not going to be talking about products. I'm going to be telling you conceptually what you need. It's going to be up to you to figure out what product best suits your needs, because the product that suits you for a particular concept may not be suitable for another person. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And when I talk about protection, what I'm really talking about is insurances. Various types of insurance to protect you against the things that may happen to you. Let's say, for example, you fall ill. Something happens to you, like a heart attack or a stroke, which are very common these days. The ambulance takes you to the hospital, and the doctors perform expensive medical procedures on you there. And when things like these happen, cost quickly becomes an afterthought. Saving the person's life becomes first priority. I just met a guy while doing laundry whose son suffered an aneurysm. And he came all the way from Fresno to be treated in the hospital here because it was a much better hospital. And the guy only wanted the best for his son. While we were talking, the guy mentioned that he had no idea how he was going to pay for it, but he was going to worry about it later. The most important thing was that his son got better, which really is the only way to look at it at the time. But his family may be paying the bills for this incident for many years to come. Now imagine something happens to you. You break your foot, your arm, you get some sort of disease or whatever that keeps you from doing your job and taking care of yourself. Now if you can't do your job, you're not going to be able to make the money you need to provide for yourself and your family. If you can't take care of yourself, then you're going to need somebody to take care of you. And usually the responsibility of caring for you is going to fall on your family, whether they like it or not. I was just speaking to my Lyft driver the other day who said she had been a baker for 40 years. Then all of a sudden, something happened to her hand. I don't remember what it was, but it prevented her from kneading the dough or something in the particular fashion that her job required. So long story short, she was out of a job. And even after having worked at this place for 40 years, instead of retiring, she's now having to drive Lyft to make ends meet. Now she may have never thought that such a thing might happen to her, but that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Everything in this world is temporary, including your ability to perform certain actions. So you should be prepared for such a thing happening. It may mean the difference between a comfortable retirement and driving around entitled millennials. Another thing that may happen to you is that you die too soon, leaving behind a family that was depending on you to provide for them. Now, premature death is not a topic that we like to talk about, especially when we're alive, but in reality is the only logical time to do so. Remember, everything in this world is temporary and can be taken away at any time for any reason, including your life. When people who have not protected themselves from this situation die too soon, the loved ones that they leave behind find themselves in a financial nightmare and struggle to get by. Now, morbid as that sounds, all three of these situations can be protected against. For falling ill and having to do expensive things at the hospitals, there's health insurance. Most of us will have health insurance through an employer-sponsored plan, but people who are self-employed or leave their jobs will have to find health insurance elsewhere. Having a good health insurance plan has nothing to do with you being healthy. It doesn't make you more healthy. So I like to say that the best health insurance is a healthy lifestyle. And the health insurance policy that you have is really an expensive health bill insurance. I haven't been to the doctor in over 6 years, but I still have health insurance. It's not so that I can have a low co-pay and low co-insurance rates, but that if a big ugly event happens to me, I'll be prepared for it. If you stop being able to do your job or you can't take care of yourself, you're going to need something like a can't work coverage that provides you with an income stream during the time you need it. For example, the baker of 40 years turned Lyft driver would have been much better off if she had a disability insurance coverage. The disability she got preventing her from doing her baking job would have made her eligible for an income stream to replace her lost income. And if you die too soon, of course you need life insurance. Now you may think that only the main income earner needs life insurance, but that's not true. Let's say you're a family, a husband and wife and 2 children. The husband is the main income earner, earning $100,000 per year to support his family. The wife stays home and takes care of the children and the household. You may think that the husband is the only one that needs life insurance, but that's simply not true. A recent study put the average value of a stay-at-home housewife at just under $125,000 per year. So you gotta be prepared for both parents to die too soon. Now, in the ideal situation, life insurance is not something that you're gonna need for all of your life, but only during a period where you have people depending on you, or if you have some large debt that might need paying off if you die. When you're raising children, you should be focusing on making them, as quickly as possible, self-sustaining individuals so that they can take care of themselves. It's only if you die in the middle of that process where this protection would be necessary. Something else that you need if you die too soon are die too soon documents. These include things like a will, a trust, an estate plan, and directives. For example, a will. It tells the world what you want to do with your stuff when you're no longer around to speak for yourself. You may have it planned out all in your head where your stuff is going to go if you die, but unless it's written down on an official piece of paper, then nobody really knows. You could leave your heirs in chaos and confusion, and fights may break out among them. If you do leave a will, well, they still might be angry, but at least they'll only be angry at you. But you're dead, so it doesn't really matter. I heard a story recently about a mother who fell ill and fell into a coma. She didn't have any healthcare directives telling the doctors what to do in such a situation, and none of the family members wanted to be the one to say pull the plug on their mom. So they just said keep her alive as long as you can and maybe a miracle will happen. There's no way of knowing if that's what the mother wanted because it wasn't written down anywhere. After many years, they're still awaiting the exciting conclusion while also paying a hefty price. So these are some of the things that you need protection for. The reason that a lot of people don't have protection for these things is because they lack awareness, which you now have. There are, of course, other things that you'd want protection for, but these are more common and you probably already know about them. For example, your home. You have home insurance for that, or renter's insurance if you rent. If you have a car, you know you need car insurance, and some people even have pet insurance for the pet. A couple months ago, I took my pet to the vet and found out that he had a bladder stone. The operation to get it out of there in total cost $1,500. I didn't have pet insurance, so I had to pay out of pocket for it. But it was okay because I had an emergency fund, which we will get to later on. But many people would rather pay a low monthly rate to be insured against high veterinary bills. Some people even go as far as to have insurance for the phone. I personally have never had phone insurance, but if you're someone who has always broken the screen on their phone or loses it many times a year, then you may want to look into something like this or get a case or something. So now let's talk about debt management. Most Americans spend $1 more than they earn. They have more money coming out of their pocket than they have coming into it. And when you spend more than you make, you're not in a very pretty situation. We're all very familiar and in love with a concept called debt because it allows us to buy things that we don't need but really, really like with money that we don't have. And we've accepted the idea that we're happy to pay for our new TV or new car for our entire working lives and sometimes even into retirement. When we don't know what our cash flow is and we don't want to look at our debt because it makes us cry, we end up in a situation where we have a big boulder attached to our feet, and we can't really do anything about it because the debt has to be serviced. Credit does not mean free. Credit is what the marketing manager got when he was able to convince broke people to go on vacation and pay for it for the rest of their lives. Do you see what I did there? Now, in America, this is a very common situation. 75% of millennials, 76% of Gen Xers, and 77% of parents are stressed about money. And that probably means that 3/4 of the people in America are living in one of these situations we just saw. 31% of adults are struggling to get by. What I take that to mean is that they're living paycheck to paycheck, or worse. They're shackled by a debt that they feel like they may be paying off for the rest of their lives. They have no hope for their future, no hope of ever retiring, and feel like they may die on the job. But even though the situation looks grim, it is something that you can get out of. And you can get out of it by making a budget, which is going to serve as your plan to getting out of debt. First of all, The budget is going to let you know if you're spending more than you make. It's going to let you know exactly how much you're spending on and on what. So if you see that you're in the situation like the gentleman on the left here, what it'll force you to do is cut down on your spending. And on the other hand, it's going to encourage you to go out there and make more money, because you're going to realize that you can only cut so much, but there's no limit to how much you can make. And that's the secret of understanding your cash flow to build wealth. Another thing that the budget is going to do is get you to know thyself. When I first started budgeting, I realized that I was buying things unconsciously, and I was buying a lot of stuff that I didn't really need. I would buy something, look at it for a day or two, and then, put it on the shelf and never touch it again. I can't begin to even count the number of useless things that I bought. But now that I budget religiously, I know what I want to spend my money on and what I don't want to spend money on. Something else that you're going to need outside of the budget and the self-knowledge is the willpower and determination to get out of the situation. Getting out of debt might feel like climbing a big, impossibly tall mountain. And many of us have decided that we're not even going to try. And that's okay, as long as you have life insurance so you don't pass it on to your loved ones. But the way to reach the top of any mountain is to take it step by step, one step at a time. And the willpower and the determination that you have, you're going to make sure that you see it through and get to the top. You will be debt-free if you want to be. So now let's talk about the emergency fund. The emergency fund is exactly what it sounds like. It's a fund that you can pull on when you have emergencies. I told you earlier that my cat had a bladder stone and I had to take him in for an operation, which cost about $1,500. It wasn't a big deal at all for me financially because I had an emergency fund. A couple weeks ago, I got my car towed. And that was a dumb mistake, just because I forgot to put a reminder in my calendar to move my car for the rush hour traffic. It was a $600 expense, but because I had an emergency fund, I didn't have to borrow money or sell anything to cover the cost of it, which is not true for almost 46% of Americans, who could not cover a $400 emergency expense out of pocket. So the lack of an emergency fund and poor debt management create a vicious cycle that gets one deeper and deeper into debt, as well as probably depression. It makes the mountain that you gotta climb taller and taller, colder and more difficult to scale. As we talked about before, everything in this world is temporary. So another thing that could happen is that you come into work one day and your boss decides to fire you. It may be because he secretly didn't like you and was looking for a way to get rid of you, or the company just had to cut costs and you were on the list. Now imagine this, 46% of Americans can't even cover a $400 emergency expense. So what would they do if they lost their jobs? How long would they be able to survive without taking drastic measures or moving out on the street? So you should be prepared for this situation or any other emergency with a pile of cash. Now if you don't have an emergency fund, I recommend starting off with getting $1,000 into some kind of savings or checking account. Then once you have that, build it up to 3 months, then 6 months, and then 12 months worth of living expenses. That way you have peace of mind if anything were to happen. And when things do happen, your finances are not going to be affected in any major way. Now last we're going to talk about investments. Now most of the time when we hear investments, we're thinking saving for retirement. And if you're young, you're probably thinking that you have a lot of time. There's no point in saving so much in your 20s and 30s because, well, you're going to retire when you're 65 and you got your whole 40s and 50s to save for retirement. Well, most of us think like that. And then we wake up when we're 55, close to retirement, we look at our statements and realize that we have a lot less than we actually need. And the reason for that is that we were short-sighted and bought things to impress people we didn't really like or to keep up our image on social media. When we bought a house, we bought a too big house. We bought more than we needed and we didn't put enough down because we didn't have enough money at the time. So we ended up overpaying and overextending ourselves and bought into the idea that a house is one of the best investments that you can make. Anytime we buy something just for our instant gratification with no real long-term purpose, we are sapping away the time that our money has to grow so that we can live comfortably in retirement. I can't tell you how many people I've met that are waking up in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s realizing that they have nothing saved. So now they're scrambling to get something together. And some are even considering guilt-tripping their children into supporting them as they go into old age without the necessary funds. Now, to get this crucial piece of the puzzle right, you're going to need a nest egg. A nest egg of appropriate size for the lifestyle that you want to have in retirement. Now, a nest egg can be an investment account, annuities, real estate. It doesn't really matter as long as it's generating some form of income stream that you can use to support yourself as you enjoy your time between your working years and death. The nest egg is probably the easiest component of the puzzle. What else you need to know is how to grow your money. I meet a lot of people who think that saving for retirement means taking their money and putting it in a savings account. This might be a good strategy if you're a couple years away from retirement, but when I hear a 20-year-old saying this, I cry inside. I admire them for saving, but what they don't realize is that any money that they have in the savings account is going to decrease steadily over time due to the hidden tax of inflation. Getting 2 or 3% in a savings account isn't the best way to go about saving for retirement. So then people often look for vehicles that give them greater percentage yield, and often they come up with something like a CD. Now I gotta give credit to the marketers at these banks because they've done such a good job in convincing people that CDs are safe long-term investment vehicles. And one of the ways they do that is by just calling the product a 120-month CD. Look at this rate table I found from a popular bank. It's nuts. I'm sure that somebody is going to be convinced to buy a 120-month CD because the rates are slightly better than the 84-month CD. CD stands for certainly decrease, because if you buy one of these for the long term, that's exactly what's going to happen to the value of your money. You've probably heard the term no risk, no reward, and that's true in this scenario also. So you gotta know how to grow your money. And then you gotta know how to preserve it. Once your nest egg has reached the appropriate size, you want to switch strategies from growing to preserving your money. It's a different strategy, and you gotta know how to do it as well. The last thing that you want to happen is that you built up a nice nest egg, then all of a sudden you don't have enough because you didn't know how to manage the transition. The other crucial piece of this puzzle is to have the vision and the foresight needed to build an appropriate nest egg. As I said before, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are going to think that they have a lot of time to invest for retirement when their income goes up, when they get promotions and raises. But the funny thing is, the best time to save for retirement is in your 20s and your 30s, at the beginning of your working career. And if you get it right early on, you may need to save less and less as you get older. But a lot of times, we don't understand the magic of compounding and the crucial role that time plays in the whole thing. So I want to do an exercise to drill it into your head right now. I want to lay out for you 2 scenarios. In one scenario, you don't save in your 20s, but you save in your 30s instead. In the other scenario, you start saving as soon as you start working. In both cases, you invest your money into the stock market, and on average, you get 8% returns. Now, this is an oversimplified scenario because the market does go up and down, and it's not going to return 8% every year. But in the past 100 years, the S&P 500 has returned on average 9.5% every year. So 8% is an okay number to use in this scenario. But either way, the point of this is to show you the power of saving early. So in the right-hand case, you end up saving from age 22 to 30, $20,000 a year over 9 years. That's a total of $180,000. In the left-hand scenario, you say, I'll start saving later when I get a raise, when I get a bonus, when I get a better job. I want to live and let live in my 20s. Carpe diem. So instead, you start saving when you're 31 years old, and you save all the way until you're 40. You save $200,000. In the right-hand side scenario, instead of saving the $20,000, you start using the $20,000 to provide a better life for you and your family, which means that you stop being able to save that much. But we can see that in each of these scenarios, the version of you that saved early has a lot more money at age 40 than the version of you that saved late does. Almost twice the amount of money. Now let's go on and see how much each version of you is going to have by the time that they're 70 years old. Surprised? Now that's the power of saving early. Even though the version of you that saved late saved more money in total, the version of you that saved early has almost double the amount of money. Now let me entertain you with another scenario. You save late, but you decide that you want to catch up, and you're going to buckle down on your finances even after you turn 40 years old, all the way until your retirement age of 70. Instead of saving $200K over 10 years, what you end up doing is saving $800K over 40 years. You keep investing $20,000 each year. Look what happens. You are still not able to catch up to the version of you that saved early. Even though you invested every single year, you could not catch up. So if you're procrastinating on saving money for retirement, I hope that this gives you the vision and the foresight you need to start saving today. So that's it. I've covered all the components you need to set up a strong financial foundation for yourself. From protection, debt management, emergency fund, to investments. Now, it's not a difficult thing to set up, but once you do set it up, you'll be able to focus your time, energy, and effort on things other than financial stress and worry. Now you might be wondering, well, what should I start with? Well, I'd say that you do everything at once because you have a lot of time in a single day. But if you want to take it step by step, then I recommend you starting at the bottom and working your way up. Start with protection. Take an inventory of your assets and liabilities and the what if scenarios that we talked about earlier. And then make sure you have the proper insurances in place. And I would start with this because a big ugly event could devastate you financially. And it won't really even matter if you have one of the other buckets set up properly. After protection, I would move on to debt management. Start a budget. It doesn't matter how you budget, whether it's on a software, a spreadsheet, or physical envelopes. It just matters that you do it. It's one of those things that you'll get better at over time and find a style that works for you. If you're married, make only one budget for the both of you. You're both in it together, so you should only have one budget. A budget that you agree on and are working together on. Then set up your emergency fund. Start with $1,000 and then use your budget to determine what 3, 6, and then finally 12 months of living expenses is. And work your way up in the emergency fund slowly until you reach that number. And finally, start building that nest egg that you're going to need in retirement. Understand what kind of an investor you are. Are you somebody that is comfortable with taking a lot of risk for a potential of greater reward? Or would you rather invest in something that's less risky, but you're okay with a lower return? Are you somebody that likes to actively manage their portfolio? Or would you rather set it and forget it? And once you have this financial foundation in place, give yourself a pat on the back and move on to the next challenge in life. You deserve it. But don't completely forget about it. I mean, your budget is going to need maintenance. Your emergency fund may need to change as time goes on, and your investments are going to need attending to. And you may need to update the protection that you have as your situation in life changes. Thanks for watching, and please share this video with somebody who needs it. Goodbye!